Money. Is Bitcoin the answer?
Welcome aboard to this presentation for today. The theme of this presentation is entitled Bitcoin. Can Bitcoin replace money? So this is the first in a series of Flynamics. Flynamics is basically combining flight simulation with economics and finance. So the concept is we would be doing the pre-planning for the flight from point A to B. You'll see a little bit of that. Then you'll see the takeoff, and then once in the cruise, I will basically start talking about topics. Today's topic again is about Bitcoin and can Bitcoin replace money? Because it's such an interesting topic, this will be part one, and of course I'll cover part two at a later date. So sit back, relax. The agenda points for the presentation will be forthcoming. In the meantime, I would like to let you know that our sponsors are Second Chance Recruitment and Training Agency, NV, as well as Passion 2. So sit back again and relax, and we'll be discussing the agenda points and taking you into this presentation for today. Bye-bye. I want to welcome you aboard to this virtual flight from Keywest International to Manley Jamaica International. Flight time today would be approximately 1 hour and 15 minutes. And on this journey today, we'll be discussing can Bitcoin replace money? So on the agenda today, we'll of course, before we get into the discussion, we'll be actually in a cruise at 41,000 feet, and then I will get into that discussion. It will be part one, and then part two will come at a later date. Prior to that, of course, we will be going through the flight planning using SimBrief and looking at the weather, number of passengers on board, and calculate the takeoff speeds, etc. And then we get into the aircraft. We will do the flight management system, do our pre-checks and so forth. I'm not going to go through that entire thing in detail because this is my first video actually doing the theme of Flynamics. So we're looking at using flight simulator as well as economics and finance and combining the two. So this is my first go at it, and so as I go forward, it'll be getting better and better and better. So I'll just give some snapshots of the actual planning and the taxiing and the takeoff, etc. And then once we reach a cruise altitude, we will get into the discussion. Then of course we get into the descent and the landing aspect, and then of course I would leave you see that aspect throughout the window, and also the cockpit landing as well, and then we'll end it for today. So that will be basically the end of part one. So that's the agenda for today. Okay, so today's flight planning is basically 3rd of January 2023, 10:40 Zulu. So departure is scheduled for 10:40 Zulu, arrival into Manley at 12:35 Zulu. Estimated time en route is hour and 27. Correction, hour and 15 minutes. So we departing from Keywest, going to Manley Kingston. This is not actually the tail number. For somehow SimBrief doesn't have the layer 35A, so we use the layer 25, and so this is the standard default number that they're using. I didn't fill in any number for the tail because, like I said, I'm using layer jet 35A. We're actually traveling with 7 passengers, and the route. This is the flight plan route for the flight management system. Fuel en route is just 2,300 pounds. It's an hour and 15 minutes. These are the weights on this side over here. And then it gives us the our planned arrival fuel, so we know to input that into our weight in order to know the landing speeds. The wind for the takeoff, runway 09. Temperature is 25. Pressure is 30.10. Landing is expected on runway 30 in Kingston. These are the planned pressure. and then of course this is the route, and these are the winds, en route winds at the different altitudes. If you come down, I'm gonna go straight down to the profile. So this is our route here, but I would like to see the wind profile. So on this page you're seeing basically kicking off Keywest, Foxtrot India Sierra, climbing to 41,000 feet, top of climb, the waypoint, and these are the winds. So we expect a strong tailwind, roughly around 59 to 57 knots tailwind, top of descent, start descending down to Savem and then into Manley. So that's basically the flight planning and weather situation for the flight on the 3rd of January. So here we at the walk around. We'll be doing the walk around the layer 35A. Let's check and make sure everything is okay. Okay, so once we enter the aircraft, we will start our pre-start checklist. So normally I like to turn on the flight management system to get the flight plan loaded, and then of course we go through a pre-flight check like park and brake set, throttle idle, fuel cut off, a battery master switch make sure it's on, gear level check down, flaps is up, spoiler retracted, fuel quantity, we will check that, and so forth. So we have a whole checklist that we go through. We have a pre-flight checklist, we have a startup checklist, of course we have a start checklist before taxiing, and etc. So this is basically what we going through at the moment right now.
All aircraft reback hold short instructions. Advise controller on initial contact US Papa. Keywest Airport Information, Quebec. 1040 Zulu. Wind 125 at 11. Visibility greater than 20 miles. Sky conditions, new clouds at 2,300, 3,900. Scattered. Temperature 25, dew point 22. Altimeter 3009er. Visual runway 9er in use. Landing and departing runway 9er. VFR aircraft say direction of flight. All aircraft reback hold short instructions. Advise controller on initial contact US Quebec. Keywest clearance delivery, Bombardier, November 9er25, Delta Mike, IFR, Manley, ready to come.
Bombardier, November 9er25, Delta Mike is cleared to Manley Airport as filed. Fly runway heading climb and maintain 14,000. Departure frequency is 124.45, squawk 0123.
Bombardier, November 9er25, Delta Mike, cleared to Manley Airport as filed. Fly runway heading, climb and maintain 14,000. Departure on 124.45, squawk 0123.
Bombardier 5, Delta Mike, readback is correct. Contact ground on 121.9er when ready to taxi.
Niner 25 Delta Mike with uniform, ready to taxi IFR.
Bombardier, November Niner 25 Delta Mike, taxi to and hold short of runway Niner, using taxiway Alpha 5 Alpha. Contact tower on 118.2 when ready.
Taxi to and hold short runway Niner, using taxiway Alpha 5 Alpha, Bombardier 5 Delta Mike.
Once again, welcome on board. We'll be departing shortly. Make sure your seatbelt is securely fastened and your seat is in upright position.
Welcome aboard this Flynamics venture. The topic today is, can Bitcoin replace money, or should Bitcoin be the one to replace money? So today we're going to talk about that. It's going to be a part one, because I realized that the topic can be very technical, so I had to find a way to break it down in more layman terms. So I decided to split in parts. So this will be part one, just to give you a historical background so you can understand the gist of things, and it'll allow you to also come to your own conclusion. And so by having that background information, you can make better informed decisions, or come to the right answer, I would say. Now, artificial debt cycles is nothing new. We had numerous persons discussing them. One of the persons that are very adept in discussing these type of cycles is Ray Dalio. If you don't know him, Google him, YouTube him, and you will get a wealth of information on Ray Dalio. He's also on LinkedIn. He wrote some articles on LinkedIn, which is very interesting articles talking about cycles in general, and how empires has come and gone, and how they rise and how they fall as well. Now, one of the big things that occur, and particularly in 2008 crash, was quantitative easing, and we saw it again after the pandemic. Now, the problem with quantitative easing is that it drives mainly financial assets upwards, while at the same time, interest rates tend to be pushed lower. Now, the question you need to ask is, who are the majority owners of financial assets? And who are the majority who save, or at least used to save? Our parents back in the day used to save, and not so much the youth today, because most of the time the debt levels in terms of the school and the colleges debt is so high, it's difficult for them to save, especially if they don't get a good job right out of college. But the problem with savings, however, is savings relies on productivity to achieve. So what I mean by that is basically, for you to get savings, you have to work, so you have to put in them labor hours, and by putting them in labor hours, you get your income, and then part of that income, whether it's 10%, 5%, goes into savings. So there has to be some productive way for you to generate those savings, and then those savings can be used for different things. It can be used to invest, etc., etc. Now, financial assets in a quantitative easing environment goes up without any productivity force being applied, and this is one of the problems I'm seeing. However, upon liquidating those financial assets, the funds can be used to buy up what I call real assets, like real estate, businesses, or set up real businesses, tangible businesses, and so savers are penalized as they hold on to old values, such as savers are winners. Usually back in the day, we had this, your parents would tell you that, savers are winners. While the new context basically is that savers are losers. When we say savers are losers, what do we mean? Now today is a bit different, because the interest rates are going up, so the Federal Reserve is actually trying to slow down the economy because of inflation. But the thing is, prior to that, you had 1%, less than 1% on savings, means your savings were not growing sufficiently enough to combat inflation. While at the same time, financial assets, keep growing and growing because of that quantitative easing, and become out of reach for most persons. In addition, the liquidators of financial assets, who in turn buy real assets, further push up the price of those real assets as well. So here you have financial assets and other assets. Once they liquidate the financial assets, after they have accumulated such a mass amount, after that quantitative easing money got into the system, currency or credit, or whatever you want to call it, and push up artificially the financial assets. When you sell them, you get tangible funds to invest in real assets, and that also pushes up those. So you have a double whammy, so to speak. Now, ultimately, what drives the economic systems today? Now, we can see that creditism does, and not capitalism. And people might think, okay, capitalism exists, but capitalism in this context doesn't really exist. It has evolved into creditism. Now, many things has evolved over time, and so has capitalism. Capitalism used to be a term used where hard work, savings and hard works and accumulation of productive means to generate income was the order of the day, but that took time. So in other words, this was not the case in the past. In the past, capitalism was the main driver of the economy, but capitalism meant that savings had to be accumulated, which takes productivity, and thus takes a longer time to happen. These accumulated funds are used to buy capital goods. Capital goods in turn helps grow the economy. But the problem today is that easy credit replaces the need to build up savings over time. And borrowing also helps sustain the economy. Now, to gain a better insight on this scenario, let's look at the work done by Jeff Booth in his book titled The Price of Tomorrow, particularly on page number 12. So I'm going to get that book right now, and I'm going to go through it on page 12 to see exactly what I'm saying when I refer to capitalism and creditism. So on page 12, I'm reading from The Price of Tomorrow, or Why Deflation is the Key to an Abundant Future by Jeff Booth. And I'm reading from page 12. He says, in 2000, the total debt in the world was approximately US 62 trillion. At the same time, the world economy in 2000 was about US 33.5 trillion. Since 2000, the world economy has grown from US 33.5 trillion to about US 80 trillion. But to achieve that growth, the total debt has grown to over US 247 trillion as of the third quarter of 2018, according to the Institute of International Finance. In other words, it has taken approximately 185 trillion of global debt to achieve 46 trillion of global growth. If we stopped adding to that debt and started to pay it back at a rate of $1,000 per second, it would take nearly 8,000 years to pay this off. Instead, we keep adding to it, and it gets even worse. If it took creating 185 trillion of debt to get only 46 trillion of growth, I'll show you in chapter 4 why it will take at least double that amount of debt to get another 46 trillion of growth. The mirage of growth today is nothing more than a debt-fueled spending binge. So this was said by Jeff Booth in his book, a very interesting book. So you can see here that creditism is really the order of the day. And so how do we handle ourselves in such an environment? And that's basically the question of the day. Now, in the work done by Ray Dalio, where Ray Dalio uses a formula that states M plus C is equivalent to total spending. In other words, M is money, plus C is credit, and because of those two allow people to spend. So those two make up kind of a total spending in the economy. Today we use the word money, but however, in a few you will see that money is not really money anymore. It's actually currency. The money has evolved, and it has evolved into now credit as well. I'll show you that evolutionary phase in a bit. Now, if you divide the total spending, so if we say M plus C equals total spending, and if you divide that total spending by the amount of goods and services that was actually sold in the economy, you get an average price of goods and services within that economy. Now, you need to understand that credit spends just like money, and it's also easy to create, which leads to faster spending as opposed to money, which comes from labor productivity, which takes longer to generate. Now, a human being working generates billable hours, and those hours translate to income. Now, that income in turn is used to purchase goods and services. However, the credit component does not necessarily need productivity in first instance to be generated. So when you borrow money or get credit, you can actually buy goods and services immediately. There's no time lag except for maybe the approval process of credit if you don't already have access to it. But some people, have overdraft facilities as well as credit cards. The credits from the credit card can be created instantly. So therefore, credit is mostly the contributing factor responsible for spending. Because there has not been any theoretical limit set on credit, it ultimately amplifies business cycles as well as debt cycles. And Ridalio highlighted this very eloquently in his presentation, how the economy works. Now, because one person's spending is another man's income, according to Ridalio, spending from mostly credit eventually creates an artificial growth in the economy. If, however, credit is artificially created while production of goods and services are not keeping pace, we see the result in rising prices and a demand for rising income. Now, the rising prices go towards producers while consumer debt rises, which ultimately will cause stagnation as purchasing power decreases. And that happens if real incomes do not keep pace. And that usually happens where the prices are going up. You might get some raise in salary, but over time you've seen that the real incomes of households and individuals have not been keeping pace with the inflation aspect. Now, at some point, more and more existing income must be used to service the debt, while ultimately causing less demand for goods and services, thereby reducing the economy. Because again, if your salary, your income is not growing at pace, but your interest payments or your debt payments are fixed, as prices keep on rising and rising, your debt is fixed, so you have to keep paying that. So you're having less and less funds available to actually stimulate the economy further if your income does not rise with the same pace, and this is part of the issue. Now, this mechanism goes against natural law in that nature only uses what it needs, and there's a natural replenishment mechanism which tends to balance out itself. Now, by any measure, the only thing driving economic growth today is easy credit and debt. Now, if the only way to keep growing is through the addition of more and more debt that cannot be repaid, can we honestly say that we have an economic system that still works? This is a very, very interesting question. Jeff Booth goes on to say in his wonderful book called The Price of Tomorrow, Why Deflation is the Key to an Abundant Future, that technology is growing exponentially. This means that the only way to keep the existing economy growing and combat the effect of that exponential technology on the existing system is to allow debt to rise exponentially as well. So here Jeff Booth is saying that technology is actually in competition with inflation. And this is something that might baffle most persons, but if you sit down and really think about it, it is true. I would also say that innovation is actually in competition with innovation. You can see that with many industries, like the photo industry that was messed up by digital cameras, and now we have digital cameras in your phone. You have Netflix took over Blockbuster, and etc., etc. Now, a debt-based system is inherently inflationary, caused by the need to repay the interest. Because when you create the debt or you create credit, the only thing that's created at that point in time is the credit component. There's no interest component that is actually created as well. So you create the interest is needed as well to repay back the debt. But if the interest is not available in the economy as a whole, because we look at things from our local or regional perspective, and yes, the interest might be able to be paid because of globalization, but if you look at the world as a closed system, we're not living in space or whatever in terms of Mars or whatever. So if you look at it as one closed system globally, one world system, as a whole, the interest is not the interest that has to be repaid is never within the system. It has to be created again, and that compounds the problem. It's like you're always chasing a phantom. So debt and credit can be created instantly, but interest on the debt and credit does not exist in the economy after initial and new debt and credit is created. Therefore, there's never enough credit and debt in the system to allow the repayment of interest. So the game is sort of a game of musical chairs, and musical chairs at play at the moment, in that when the music stops, someone or some country or state, etc., goes bankrupt, and the debt is destroyed. And normally when debt is destroyed, it means that someone owns that debt, and the person who owns the debt now loses that, and basically it can really destroy a lot of companies as well, including pension funds, persons who even had put their money in the bank, that the money was lent out, etc., and now it cannot be repaid, and then you have persons have a problem, and you get a collapse, because there's always insufficient debt and credit in the system to be able to repay interest. Debt and credit must continually be expanding to try to repay outstanding interest. Now, as foolish as this may sound, this is of course mathematically impossible, and it's like trying to chase a phantom. Now, unless governments are allowed to create debt-free currency to the tune of the outstanding interest and spend this directly into the economy, interest can never be repaid in the current setup. Now, many don't recognize this because we live in a global economy where trade imbalances exist, but when you look at the global economy as one closed system, interest can never be repaid. Now, compounding this issue is that the current system is designed for a framework that relies on scarcity and inefficiency. But today's technological context means that our current system is in direct conflict with the technological evolving system. So although money and technology has been evolving, man's framework is prehistoric. Because technology is growing exponentially, in order for the economy to not stagnate, because of technology is deflationary, the system has even more incentive to allow debt to rise exponentially in order to combat the exponential aspects of technology. Remember that the symptom of inflation is rising prices, which makes those with assets seem richer while those with savings seem poor. Deflation is the opposite, in that it reduces the price of assets and makes savers seem richer. Now, the question is, am I against debt, or is debt a bad thing? Now, before answering this, I think it's very important to understand the evolutionary stages of money, and then I can get into specifically answering that question. The evolution of money went as follows. Barter trade was the first. That was the first way of how persons trade. Goods and services actually bought other goods and services. So there was no money in a barter environment. It just was goods trading for goods, services traded for services. Of course, there were some issues with that, and so commodity money came about to help alleviate barter. It was never meant to replace it, but to help alleviate it or make it more efficient, and that was the first evolutionary step. Now, commodity money, as you may know, started out with different types of commodities. You have salt, you have shells, you have sticks, and all those things, but eventually it moved to silver and gold as the last transition in terms of the best selection for commodity money. However, you had various types of commodities that people tried before the silver and gold part became the ultimate usage. From commodity money, it went to symbolic money. Symbolic money can be explained with the goldsmiths, how the goldsmiths actually did it. When you deposit a receipt for your gold, and then persons would not come back for the gold, but would actually spend the receipts. And so that whole process in the banking came about of the goldsmiths example. So that's symbolic money, where you don't use a physical commodity now. You have a paper representing that. And so symbolically, but you can convert it at any time, so that's symbolic. And then of course the Nixon shock done away with that, so then when the Nixon abandoning the gold standard and the Bretton Woods agreement, money became credit, and that was the second evolutionary step, which measure of value is yet to be defined. So how do we define credit money? Because as with the symbolic money, it's defined by the gold backing it. With credit money, there's no backing except the faith and belief in the government. That's why when you look at a dollar now, it says "In God we trust." In the past, it was redeemable for gold. Now, from there, we went on to the third evolutionary step, which was credit clearing. And credit clearing is basically saying if you want to transfer money from one bank to another, from one country to another, the money doesn't actually move. Banks have accounts within each other, and so there's a clearing mechanism that happens via central banks and so forth. Now most people have it. Now most countries have clearing houses that are automated, and so the clearing happens via that. But there's no physical money moving. They're just debits and credits, and then if there's an imbalance, they may or may not settle with actual physical money, even maybe gold. And we have seen now there might be a fourth evolutionary step, which is cryptocurrencies. Now within the credit and credit clearing aspects, you already have digital, so those are digital funds as well. So I didn't classify crypto on the digital, even though it is a digital currency. But cryptos are a bit different because we have been technically using digital money already, and as we don't really walk around with physical cash. The problem with credit, however, is that it has yet to be defined, and until then, credit is a form of currency and not money. Money was designed to help alleviate and improve barter, not to replace it, because ultimately goods and services buy other goods and services, and what we use as a temporary medium to help the trading process go more smoothly is not or should not be as important as being able to move trade so efficiently. Today, however, the focus is more on the medium as opposed to trade itself. Now, this temporary placeholder effect can also be seen biblically. If you read in Deuteronomy 14, 22 to 26, it explains the concept of this temporary placeholder, which is the medium of the money. Like I said, back in the day, it was, commodity was very important, especially silver and gold. But in this particular scripture, it's going to refer to silver and how the concept of tithing. And so the concept of tithing is a bit different explained here, and you can see where the confusion actually happens in the church when people talk about tithing. But nonetheless, it says here, be sure to set aside 1/10 of all that your fields produce each year. Eat the tithe of your grain, new wine, and olive oil, and the firstborn of your herds and flocks in the presence of the Lord your God at the place he will choose as a dwelling for his name, so that you may learn to revere the Lord your God always. But, here it comes, if that place is too distant, and you have been blessed by the Lord your God and cannot carry your tithe, because the place where the Lord will choose to put his name is too far away, then exchange your tithe for silver, and take the silver with you, and go to the place the Lord your God will choose. Use the silver to buy whatever you like, cattle, sheep, wine, or other fermented drink, or anything you wish. So here you're seeing that the tithe here is actually real wealth. So you're talking about grain, new wine, olive oil, firstborn of your herds and flocks, and so forth. But those things are, when you want to travel, it's difficult to travel with all these things, herds especially, and so forth. So here he's saying, if you cannot take that tithe, convert it or sell it to get silver, and then when you reach to the place, you can convert it back into real wealth, which is the tithe. So you can see that the silver was actually representing a temporary placeholder, because at the end of the day, you cannot eat silver. When you have wine, herds, or whatever, that's food. You understand? So the monetary aspect was just a way for us to be able to move trade more efficiently as possible. Because actually back in the day, how they would measure value, they would actually have a weighting system, and one side would be gold, a certain standard of gold, and then they would put on the goods on the other side, and then when it balances, that's how they determine value for value. It was never about money, and etc., etc. Money was created now more to help us count and be a temporary placeholder, but later, of course, it became corrupted. Now, the evolution to credit is not necessarily bad. The problem is who's authorized to control it. Now, if credit is not a democratic process and is left up to centralized institutions who abuse it, then here's where the problem really lies. Because credit is yet to be defined, it can be created in excess of actual goods and services. Now, we need to understand this implication, because Thomas Jefferson actually said it very, very well. Thomas Jefferson said there's only two rules for money: enough to move trade on one hand, and not enough to cause speculation on the other. Two ingredients, humanity and the soil, are the only two ingredients that is needed to determine the amount of money needed in the economy. So in other words, proper issuance and redemption of credit becomes the order of the day. In this light, can we say that Bitcoin fits this perspective? And this is the ending of part 1, because I want you to think on that question before part 2 is aired. Because again, when I said in other words, the proper issuance and redemption of credit becomes the order of the day, here you're seeing issuing and also redemption, so redeeming back the credit. So there has to be a fluctuation up and down, and that fluctuation has to be geared towards the demand for goods and services in the market, because not all the time you always have a peak in demand and so forth. There has to be ups and downs, and so Bitcoin does Bitcoin fit this issuance and redemption of credit aspect? And if you cannot already answer that, you will be able to in part 2. So stay locked.
From the flight deck, just checking in to update you guys. We are reaching our top of the descent, so we'll be descending shortly. Hope your flight was a pleasant one so far. As I said earlier, we shall have some bumpy weather coming down, so I'll just inform you to ensure that your seatbelt is securely fastened, and I'll try to make that ride a bit more smooth as possible. In preparation for landing, be certain your seat back is straight up and your seat belt is fastened. Please secure your carry-on items and store your table. We'll be landing shortly. Welcome to Kingston Manley International Airport. It will take us a few minutes to taxi to our parking location, so I ask you to remain seated with your seatbelt securely fastened until we get to our stand. And welcome to Jamaica.